Welcome, everybody. This is our special event for financial month. All you life bookers out there, I hope you've been catching up on all your finances because we've been trying to push you, nudge you, encourage you. And today we have a very, very special guest to help you along that path. LouAnn Lofton is the author of the book beside me here, Warren Buffett Invests Like a Girl, and Why You Should Too, which is an awesome read. I have to say, LouAnn, I've read lots and lots of investment books. This one encapsulates all the essentials in a very easy to read style. So if you do not own the book, I encourage you to buy it. But LouAnn is going to go through and walk us through a lot of what's in the book already and give her a little bit of her journey. Let me just say a couple of things about LouAnn and I. We always look for commonalities in life, right? So LouAnn and I were both worked at the Motley Fool at one time. So we have that in common. We're both investors, so we have that in common. We're both investing educators, so we have that in common. And if you read her book, as she talks about all the other things she reads beside to get away from investing a little bit, she mentions something called the Santa Fe Institute. Okay, Santa Fe Institute is a place where they study. It's designed to bring scientists together to study the topic of complexity or adaptive complex systems. And it turns out that I also have a connection with the Santa Fe Institute, which we won't talk about today, but there's all these points of connection. So we'll leave the physics of complexity behind, but we'll talk about the complexity and the simplicity of investing instead. So LouAnn, welcome. Please take it over. Oh, you have to unmute yourself. There you go, muted us all.
Okay, now, yes, hopefully now you can hear me. All right, well, thank you so much, Sunny. Yeah, it's great to see you after all these years. And thank you to Diego as well. And thanks for having me. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in from all over the world, it sounds like. And thanks for giving me this time, and we hope to make it worth your while. So yeah, I figure the best plan for today is for me to sort of go through, first of all, my own story as an individual investor, how I ended up sitting here today talking to you all about it, my journey. And that is what I am. I'm an individual investor. I'm not a professional. I'm not a money manager. I am someone who set out to learn about investing and plan for my future that way. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into some of the stuff that's in the book, the studies I looked at, the sort of differences between, in general, female investors and male investors. We're going to have some fun with that for sure. And then we'll close with, if we have time, which I hope we do, the story of me being able to actually meet Warren Buffett in person, which was an absolutely life-changing moment, and it still shocks me. And this is years, later, but I still can't believe this happened. So that's sort of our plan for today. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end, because I know that I can't cover everything, and you all might have certain things you'd like to ask me about. And so I'm totally open to that. All right, so let's start. So I grew up in South Mississippi, in the American South, for those of you who are not in the US, solidly sort of middle class, especially for Mississippi, which, if you know our reputation, we're a state that tends to be very poor and sort of always first in the things that you don't want to be first in, sadly. But it was a great place to grow up. It was a very small town. I mean, when I was growing up there, we had 3 stoplights, and now we're up. I think they've decreased it to 1 stoplight and a couple of stop signs. So it is a very, very tiny place. My father was a pharmacist. My mom is and was, she's still a writer and an editor. And so I didn't grow up in a family that talked about money, or that we weren't investors. I mean, we were so far away from Wall Street and New York and all that stuff. So that was not something that I grew up thinking about. Then, unfortunately, my father died unexpectedly and suddenly when I was 14 years old, almost 15. And, that was just an early life lesson for me that anything can happen, that life is unpredictable. that you've just got to sort of be prepared out there for the punches that life throws at you. So then let's fast forward a few years, and I'm out of high school, and I know when I turn 21, I'm going to inherit a little bit of money from my father's death. It was not a lot. It was a small life insurance policy, but nonetheless, I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to be 21. I knew impulsive, impetuous. I mean, your frontal lobe's not fully developed at that point, able to make these long-term decisions. But nonetheless, there was some little part of me that worried about disappointing my father, even after his death. I didn't want to waste that money. I didn't want to blow that money. It was very important to me to try to do the right thing. And so I set out to learn about investing just sort of on my own, and read about anything and everything. I mean, we're talking options, commodities, the Can Slim method from Investors Business Daily. I don't know if any of you remember that. That was a big deal back then. And all of it just seemed incredibly complex to me. And I was like, I can't do this. Like, there's no way I can do this. And then I stumbled upon this book about this guy named Warren Buffett. And it was a biography of him by Andy Kilpatrick, who at that point was sort of the main Buffett biographer. I mean, this was back in the 90s. This was a long time ago. And so I read the book, and I really just sort of connected with Buffett's story. Here was a small town guy. I mean, Omaha, Nebraska is definitely bigger than Mississippi, or Monticello, Mississippi, where I'm from. But nonetheless, he came from the Midwest. He had chosen to stay there, to come back there after being in New York. He wanted to be in his hometown. He was an independent thinker. He lived well below his means. So that sort of side of things I really connected with. But then, more importantly, what made the most sense to me was how he invested. He invested by buying great companies that he could understand, with strong moats, solid competitive advantages, and then he wanted to hold on to them for years. He was someone who was investing in businesses, not tickers. There were no complex formulas. There was no day trading, no trying to read charts, cups and handles and all that stuff. So this just made sense to me. And I thought, oh man, if he can do this and seems to be pretty good at it, then I think I can do it too. And so when I turned 21, I mean, that was how I invested. And I still own the great majority of those stocks today. I mean, I've owned Nike since 1997, Starbucks since 1998, Microsoft, Apple. I bought these companies, and I've managed to hold on to them for this long. I mean, that is the effect that Buffett has had on me. And just to talk a little bit about Buffett, I'm sure you all know. I mean, it's hard not to know who Buffett is at this point, but just a little background, to give him his due, obviously. So he took over Berkshire Hathaway in 1965. And if you look at his compounded annual gain from 1965 to 2022, he's returned 19.8% versus the S&P 500's 9.8%, including dividends. And I mean, so he's doubled. So in that 58-year span, he has basically doubled what the S&P has done. Now, I will say too, this is important. It's not a straight line up. If you look at some of the more recent years for Buffett, let's go back to say 2019. Berkshire only did 11% versus the S&P's 31.5%. In 2020, he only did 2.4% versus the market's 18.4%. Then he does get back on track last year with a 3.3% gain versus the S&P's decline of 18.1%. So this comes into play later, and something to keep in mind, because that will affect our long-term, how we need to think long-term about investing. It's not a straight line up. There's definitely going to be times, even for someone like Warren Buffett, where it's going to be difficult to make money or keep up with the market or beat the market. But overall, Buffett has managed to do this since 1965, which is incredible. And just to shout out a few companies that, we all may have heard of in association with Berkshire Hathaway, his holding company, his conglomerate. But in case you haven't, some Berkshire sort of Buffett companies that Either he's invested in for the long term or he owns outright, Coca-Cola, See's Candy, Geico Insurance, Fruit of the Loom underwear, Dairy Queen, Brooks sneakers. In the past couple of years, Apple Computer has been a huge Berkshire holding. So these are companies that, again, I think as investors, we can understand. We interact with a lot of them on, we can figure out what they're doing versus, again, trying to read all these charts or day trade or this and that. So for me, Buffett was really the answer to sort of figuring out how I wanted to handle this money. So from then on, I was a Buffett devotee, obviously never imagining that one day I'd get to meet him face to face. But we'll get on more on that later. So in the next part of my investing journey, I discovered The Motley Fool. I was in a bookstore. We were talking earlier about how much I love reading and I love bookstores and I love books. I saw this cover with these two guys wearing jester caps and in the middle of the investing section, which, trust me, really stands out. A lot of suits, a lot of serious looks. And then here are these two smiling guys back to back with investing caps or jester caps on. So I was very intrigued and set out to learn more about The Motley Fool, which at that point hadn't been around all that long. And what I discovered was an organization devoted to helping everyone improve their financial lives and take control of their financial future. I really liked that they stood up for the, quote, little person, that they believe that we're all capable of handling our own finances. They thought we should be having these conversations and learning about this topic throughout our lives. I mean, most of us do not have financial education in schools. And at any level. And so I really liked that The Motley Fool was taking the stance that you can do this. That was very affirming for me. And so I applied in the year 2000, way back then, to be a writer for The Motley Fool. And, you may remember I said my mom was a writer and an editor. So obviously Apple didn't fall far from the tree there. I became a writer at the Fool in 2000, and then just sort of worked my way up on the online side of the business. I became the news editor and then eventually the managing editor for all of our online content, coordinating coverage each day we were investors writing for investors. So we wanted to make sure that we were covering the news that mattered to the folks just like us, just like you. And so beginning in about the summer, let's say 2007, I started noticing and talking about with our team and some of our discussion board folks, some just studies and things that were coming out that were interesting to me about the differences between female investors and male investors. And it turns out some of these studies have been around for quite a while. And so in looking at some of them and then the broader implications of them, I just couldn't help but be struck. It seemed to me that there were very Buffett-like tendencies from the female investors that were in these studies. No one seemed to have talked about this before or addressed it or recognized it in such a positive, sort of encouraging way that women are naturally inclined to become great long-term investors. And so Warren Buffett Invest Like a Girl was born. The idea for the book came about and we thought, oh, this is a lot of fun and we can help a lot of people. And I will say too, I have to give my former boss credit for that title because I had written up the whole book proposal and he sort of snagged a line out of the middle of it and came up with the title. So I will give him the credit. It was a lot of fun and we continue to have a lot of fun with it. It's a playful title, but in a helpful sense, hopefully. So let's move on to part 2 now. So what does it mean when I say invest like a girl? What are we talking about here? So the book came out way back in June 2011, which is sort of incredible. And I looked at research even then going back a decade. And now there's even more studies about the sort of differences in general. And so, if I had to sort of sum it up, I would say studies show that women tend to be patient rather than impulsive, realistic rather than overconfident, and prudent rather than reckless. We tend to think longer term, take much less risk, and just generally view investing less as a game or a competition. We do more research, we ask more questions, we trade less. One study showed that men traded 45% more than women, and single men traded 67% more than women. And we don't look at investing as some sort of macho scorekeeping service or system. And studies show that men tend to be more overconfident than women. Simply put, they tend to think they know more than they do. And investing, this plays out when you buy stock in companies that you know nothing about. You'll be amazed how often this happens, hot stock tips. And I would even add in these last couple of years, a few other categories to this. One would be the Wall Street bets, sort of GameStop stuff that was happening recently, the crypto frenzy, and NFTs. Looking at all of that stuff, it just didn't make sense to me. And I don't think to Buffett or his partner Munger either. So that's all well and good. But I will add too, this calm and patient demeanor on our part results in outperformance as well. And one of the earliest studies on this from 2001, from Brad Barber and Terrence Odine, who are professors, they were professors at the University of California, they found that women outperform men by close to 1% per year. They looked at 35,000 individual brokerage accounts from February 1991 to January 1997. And a 2017 study from Fidelity found that their female clients outperformed their male ones by 0.4%. More frequent trading on the part of men compared to women, that accounts for a lot of this, the trading, increased fees, and taxes, plus just poor decision-making thanks to overconfidence. And I get it. 1% difference, 0.4% difference. These might sound like minute differences to you, but they add up significantly over time thanks to compounding. So all of this said, I would argue that the female investment, the temperament, is shared by the greatest investor the world's ever known, who's Warren Buffett. And what's more, and I think here's the key, Buffett himself has said it's temperament, not intellect, that will make you a great long-term investor. It's the ability to manage your emotions, not let yourself do things that other people do that will get you in trouble over the long term. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, that often will hurt you. So it's really thinking about temperament, managing your emotions, thinking long-term. And by the way, I'd argue that while women are often cast as the more emotional sex, when it comes to investing, men are more emotional than we are. The secret to Warren Buffett's success is that he's learned to manage his emotions like a woman. Now let's talk a little bit too about the benefits for all of us of investing like girls. So if we go from sort of the top-down view here, and again, thinking about the fact that this book came out in 2011, so I was focused a lot on the market panic of the fall of 2008 into 2009, which was, that was a rough time to manage your emotions, but that was a really critical test. And as an investor, you will have those, and you will get the opportunity to learn how to manage your emotions. And it won't be fun, but it will be very good long-term for you to do that. So if we go back and look at the events and the players leading up to the financial crisis that erupted in the fall of 2008, several things become clear. There was rampant risk-taking and over-leveraging all over Wall Street. And B, there were next to no women in positions of power or on the trading floors of the companies that would run the world economy right off its tracks. Now, I'm not suggesting, obviously, that we can ever fully eliminate market booms and busts. However, there is evidence to suggest that had more women been in influential positions throughout Wall Street and other financial firms, the recklessness leading up to the crash and the crash itself may not have been as pronounced. In fact, one study that I cite in my book talks about the role of testosterone in our financial markets. It doesn't surprise you that it has one, right? Testosterone makes groups of men do weird things. It tends to feed on itself. It makes them take more risk than is necessary, and it makes them competitive and aggressive. The authors of this study had an interesting conclusion, I'll just say. Their conclusion was that adding more women to the trading floors and boardrooms of financial companies would have a nice mitigating effect and would, quote, these are their words, not mine, quote, it would help dampen the hormonal swings in the market. You know, I'm going to let the scientists have that one, but that is a study in the book. So that's our sort of top-down view. That's looking at how more female investors could help from the top down. But now let's take the bottom-up view, which is sort of what we can control. That's what we are dealing with in our day-to-day lives. So if we know from top down, it seems like getting more women involved and convincing more men to get in touch with their feminine sides, if we know that would have a positive long-term effect on all of our 401ks, let's look at it from the point of view of the individual investor. So that also underscores the importance of having this calm, patient temperament focused on the long term. So Vanguard analyzed 2.7 million IRA accounts and the activity in them during this market panic, the fall of 2009 and the fall of 2008, in the beginning of 2009. And like I said earlier, if you weren't there, all I can tell you, I know Sunny can back me up here, is that it was a tough time to be an investor. I mean, it was a whipsawing time. Every time you turn on CNBC, not that I'm suggesting you should do that, but if you happen to, there's just deer in the headlights looks on all the anchors and all the guests. And, it was a really tough time to be an investor. So what Vanguard found during that time, interestingly enough, was that women were much more likely than men to be able to remain calm and not panic and keep their money invested. Men, on the other hand, were more likely to react to the markets plummeting by selling their stocks at the absolute worst time, locking in huge losses, and ensuring that they'd miss out on any gains when the market did eventually turn around. So having this ability to remain calm, tune out the noise, is one key trait that will make you a great long-term investor. You've got to be able to stick with it. And ideally, not only just stick with it, but adapt Buffett's famous saying. We may have all heard this, but be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy. Fall 2008 and going back to 2020 and last year as well, was a great time to be greedy and buy stocks of companies you liked at even cheaper prices. It was not a good time to panic and sell. It's incredibly hard. I don't mean to make this a light point. It is incredibly hard to control your emotions when it comes to investing. But in order to be great, you've got to learn how to do it. And unfortunately, the only way you can really learn how to do it is to be in the game and go through these tough times. I went through it in the market 2000, 2001, and then again 2008, 2009, and then these last couple of years. You just got to stay the course. So finally, let me talk a little bit about the importance of investing in personal finance for all of us, but for women in particular. So while all investors, men and women alike, can and would benefit, in my opinion, from adopting a more feminine Buffett-like temperament when it comes to investing, this issue is particularly important for women. Even if you're listening to me right now and you're not a woman, surely there are women in your lives who matter to you and who could stand to hear this message. So we are on pace in the U.S., and this is strictly U.S. wealth, by 2030 to control 2/3 of all the wealth. Furthermore, about 90% of women at some point in their lives will be responsible for all the financial decisions in a household, 90%. As well, we tend to earn less than men over time. We go into retirement with our retirement accounts funded at smaller amounts than men do. We live longer than they do. So, there are all these sort of critical points that, in my opinion, make this a really important topic for the women in your life or for you in particular. And I just would say there's no time to waste. It's better to start thinking about this stuff now and don't wait for something to force you into it. I had to think about this stuff probably earlier than I would have wanted to. But I hear from people, and I've heard stories of women who are not involved in in the financial decisions in their household, and then something tragic happens. And so they're sort of forced into figuring that stuff out at a time when it is already stressful and sad, and they're already dealing with other things. So, that's my message here, is to sort of get ahead of these things. Don't wait until you're in a position where you have to think about this stuff. So, start asking questions today. I mean, get involved. And look, it's no big deal if you don't want to be the next Warren Buffett. That's okay. I understand. Life is busy enough as it is. Index funds are a great investment over the long term if you don't want to get into sort of individual stock picking, or you can do index with a few. That's another thing that we talk about at the Fool. But at the very least, I would ask, please start asking questions if you're not tuned into sort of what's going on in your financial life right now. If you're letting other people sort of carry the load, just ask those questions now rather than doing it later. And if you do want to start investing today, if you are excited about the thought of buying stocks in individual companies, know that you are capable of it. You are absolutely capable of it. Don't be scared. Start small. Look around you. What are the stores that you frequent? What are the brands that you love? What are the companies that have your undying loyalty? We talked about a bunch of these earlier, whether they're Buffett's companies or the ones that I've owned for a long time, and there's certainly some overlap there. Where do you and your friends like to shop? Where do your children like to shop? The legendary fund manager, Peter Lynch, used to follow his wife and his daughter around the mall to get investing ideas. He knew where the smart thinking was. Women are responsible for about 73% of household spending. Where are those dollars going? We are uniquely positioned to spot promising investment ideas we can understand, just like Buffett requires. Companies like Amazon, Starbucks, Costco, Apple, Nike, these have made outstanding long-term investments. So if you spend your money in any of these, that would be a place to just start looking. And then let me add too, the resources available today online are so much easier to deal with. I mean, Buffett was going down to the actual library and having to pour through these huge books to get all his information. Now it's just a click, and you can read the annual reports for companies. You can do your own due diligence. You can compare it to other companies. I mean, there's a wealth of knowledge available today to individual investors in a way that it was not when Buffett started out. So take advantage of that. And then one final point on this, I would encourage you to involve your children. Start them thinking about this very early on. In the book, I have a great interview with Lauren Templeton, who's just one of my favorite people ever. She's the great niece of the legendary fund manager, Sir John Templeton. And Lauren and her husband run a fund shop out of Tennessee. And she talks about being a little kid and getting, for like her 7th birthday or something, getting shares of like the Gap bought for her and Disney, and getting the actual stock certificates. And she would paste them on her walls. Other little girls might have pictures of rock stars, actors, whatever. And she had her little stock certificates put up there. And she said she really got that. She understood that. That she owned a part of those businesses. And so she took great pride in that. And Tom and David Gardner, who started the Motley Fool, same thing for them. They were young, and their father started them investing early, and they would be in the grocery store, and he would point out, we own shares of this. You own a part of this company. And once you sort of embrace that ownership mentality, kids can understand that. Kids can get behind that. So, I would say, again, like I mentioned earlier, we don't have, I don't think anywhere, really great financial education throughout school systems. And so if you can sort of help start the next generation, whether it's your nieces, your nephews, the kid next door, your own kids, your grandkids, whatever, since we have a woeful lack of financial education, maybe do what you can to sort of share that love for investing and start that journey for them. So finally, let me make sure I have enough time. Yeah. So for the Warren Buffett story. So yeah, we got the book published, and we had an early copy of it. And people would ask me, and they still ask, as I was writing the book and as we were, getting ready to put the book out in the world, does Buffett know what you're saying about him? Does he know you're saying he invests like a girl? Do you have his permission to say that? Well, no, he had no clue. He had no idea. We didn't have his permission. And you know what? The thing was, I knew about Buffett. I knew that he would take it for the compliment that it is. I absolutely was confident and knew that. So we get an early copy of the book, and we've managed to get both his home address and his office address. And I guess it's a little creepy that we were able to get the home address, but that's the internet, So we sent 2 copies of the one to his house, one to his office in Omaha, Nebraska. And he, we're tracking them because I think we sent them via UPS. So we want to make sure we can track these, And so this would have been the spring of 2011, probably like, I don't know, February, March, something like that. So anyway, we're tracking the, tracking the book, and we see that it's delivered. And so there's just like, oh my gosh, we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. And then you may know this, Buffett does not use email. Maybe he does now, but certainly in 2011, he definitely didn't. So the first contact from his office was, I get an email from his assistant, and she has a screenshot of a handwritten note from Buffett saying that he got the book. He read it in a night. He thinks I nailed him at his investing style. And he's inviting me to brunch in Omaha, because I did point out at that point that I would be attending the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting that year, which is the only time I've gone. But I would, if anyone has the chance, I would say, first, little sidebar, it is hysterical and fun. They do say Woodstock for capitalists. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, that is true. You just have 60,000 people in a room, focusing on Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, who now Buffett is 93, Munger is 99. They are sharp as a tack. I mean, they haven't lost a step. Buffett knew I was coming to the annual meeting, and he hosts a brunch the day after the annual meeting, the Omaha Country Club. So he invited me to brunch. He said that I had to come alone because it was so late. So that was just terrifying to me. I am an introvert. It may not show right this second, but to have to walk into a brunch, I was absolutely scared. And then at the bottom of the note, he had written, please come up and say hi to me. I'll be the guy with the white hair, which I thought was absolutely perfect and hilarious. And he wasn't the only one, but I knew who he was. And so I obviously am just, like sort of having an out of body experience, even just reading this note. So I write back to his assistant, yes, 100% accept the invitation to brunch. And then I also asked her, I was like, is there any way you could please actually mail me the physical copy of the note? I wanted the physical copy of his note. I didn't want just the shot of it. And she was so sweet. So she did. So she sent me the note. So go to Omaha, have an incredible time at the annual meeting. Like I said, truly just a once in a lifetime experience. And then the next day is the brunch day. So, oh goodness. So I go to the Omaha Country Club and walk in. And I mean, it's just like absolutely surreal. Like I glance over and there's Bill Gates, longtime Buffett friend and, bridge player. And look over here and here's Glenn Close, the actress, long-term, I guess, a Berkshire shareholder for a long time. And I'm seeing like all these other people that I just know are the heads of different Berkshire companies. And I walk up to the table, trying to find every bit of confidence that I can. And first of all, there's no name tag for me. Like, I just couldn't believe it. No name tag. So I was like, I swear I'm not an interloper. I have to prove they invited me. So I have to have a little, handwritten name tag, which I was like, okay, I'm not gonna let that bother me. So I'll go in and I just couldn't believe I'm looking. I don't see Buffett at first. And this is what's incredible is no one's acting like it's even, a big deal. Obviously, I'm the only one sort of freaking out. I'm just hanging by the side, and Buffett eventually comes in with his family and his wife and his sisters, and they're all sitting together. So I see him. And at this point, I'm just in shock to sort of see him in person. And I have made friends with his bodyguard, who is still his bodyguard to this day. I see that guy every time I see Berkshire meeting pictures. It's the guy behind him with the, like the Secret Service thing. And so that guy is really sweet to me and is pushing, like, just go. This is your chance. This is your chance. So before Buffett could eat, I walked up and to the table and just sort of tapped him on the shoulder and just said, Mr. Buffett, I'm LouAnn Lofton. And I said, you invest like a girl. And he stood up, gave me the biggest hug, was laughing. So, oh yes, I loved your book. I loved your book. And his sisters were sitting there, Doris, who sadly passed away in 2022. 2020, and Birdie, but his two sisters. So he introduced me to them, and I had copies of the book. And the sisters loved this, obviously, and they're cracking up. And Buffett, we posed for some pictures, and I've got a copy of the book, and he pulls out his wallet and is like, wants me to act like I'm stealing his wallet, which is like so bizarre. He's like, no, hold it, and we're going to act like you're trying to take it, which I just thought was so funny. I mean, it was like, okay, I guess that's a thing that he does. And I will say, when that picture, the snap ended, I mean, the force with which he ripped that wallet back out of my fingers was hilarious. I was like, Mr. Buffett, I'm not actually trying to steal it. You're the guy who wanted to do this photo, come on. So we take our pictures. We take pictures with his sisters and his families, Astrid, his wife. And it was completely surreal, but he was everything that I hoped he would be. He was very humble and funny, very Midwestern. He was exactly who I expected him to be. And it was such an honor to meet him and to just have that moment with him. And, I did eventually leave him alone so that he could eat, so he could have his brunch. And I went and sat down at a table with Billie Jean King, of all people. Yeah. So that was another just sort of crazy moment. But, it's just insane to me to sort of look back and think about all the little twists and turns in life that ended up with me meeting Warren Buffett, and being someone that was influenced by his investment style so long ago, and who still is today. That is still how I invest. And so, again, my closing message to all of you would just be, you can do this. Believe in yourself. This is possible, and it's important. It's important. And all of you are obviously showing that by being here today. So I think that's it for me. Thank you for the time, and, happy to answer some questions, but really appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much.
Wow. Sitting ovation. I only give this to 2 people. Okay. Well done. I have to say, I knew that we had a lot of points of similarity, LouAnn, but I think we have more than I realized. I think we have an organization that we started to try to educate people about investing and personal finance. We call it Wealth Angels. And I think you're an honorary Wealth Angel.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Because you essentially echo everything we try to teach. And that's really, really, really awesome. I'm glad
that's wonderful
that you got here to kind of reinforce all of that information. Now, that these days Warren Buffett auctions off his lunches. And
they
probably
a rich ticket.
Lots and lots of money. So you got this for free. Well, you had to write a book. Okay, so I guess that's a cost of entry. But that's quite a story. I have been to the annual meeting twice. It is indeed indescribable. You have to go to if you are an investor before these guys are gone, which the clock is ticking, unfortunately. It's worth going to Omaha one time in your life. Make the pilgrimage, see what it's like. It's incredible. So I want to just ask a few questions before we turn to other questions that came to my mind. Since I'm hosting, I get that privilege.
Awesome.
So Morgan Housel, you know Morgan and I work. So I put you guys on a very similar plane. He would often say that about another Fidelity study that said that when they were looking at the accounts, individual accounts that had the highest returns, almost all of them were clustered at the top range, were accounts that people had either died and didn't notify them, or they'd forgotten about their accounts. And so you have the dead guys on one side, Then you have the ladies who are patient and long who did better. And then you got us men over here who think we're so smart and we're all trading and active and doing all this kind of crazy stuff. So you're right on the right track there. I think it's kind of interesting. Yeah, he also would often say, and this is where I have to admire you and other folks who are doing this kind of work, that if you're in the financial, I guess, writing or speaking business, there's just not that many things you can say.
Yeah, right.
Right. It really is that simple, right? I mean, that when it comes down to it. And so the art of being a financial writer or a financial speaker is to find a way to say the same thing hundreds of times a year, but make it sound interesting every time. And I think you did a great job of that.
Thank you. No, it's so true. I know, Jason Zweig at the Wall Street Journal also says the same, because he's written about these topics as well. And he said the same thing. And yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, sloth is your friend here. And there's only so many ways you can really say that. Yeah. but you know what? I would add, there's always people who need to hear that message. That is the thing that we have learned, that there are always people who have not internalized that yet. So yes, but you're right. Yeah. And I love Morgan. I love Morgan's work and his book, and yeah, he's awesome. Amazing.
Yep. These are my number one and number two investment books. So there you go. The other thing I would like to ask you about. So nowadays we have a couple of new trends in the marketplace that didn't exist even in 2011 when we were writing this book. That one is algorithmic trading,
yeah,
which is now hyper testosterone, in my opinion, right? It's like really, 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 really fast trading things. And we have this rise in the use of options instead of investing in stocks. You want to comment on that? Just some thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm just sort of sticking to what I know, I will say. I mean, yeah, if that's fine. And I get it. On the option side of things, I understand there are ways you can, use it to hedge your gains and lock things. So I get that. There are smart ways. So I don't want to act like everyone using options is doing it in a day trading sort of crazy way. There's obviously smart things, but for me, I just like the simplicity of buying these companies and holding them for the long term. I mean, that doesn't mean that I ignore them. I will say I hardly ever check my portfolio ever. It doesn't matter to me, like, because I have the long-term view in mind. But that doesn't mean I don't keep an eye on the companies within the portfolio. Because, while we say that Buffett's favorite holding period is forever, and it's a great quote. There are times where you need to sell, and it is difficult, even for me today. There are times where you have and these are my sort of selling rules, I would say. If the thesis has greatly changed, monitoring a company is something I've owned for a long time, and I see that things are going on with it that make it different, or make it, to me, not as sustainable of a great investment over the long term. That would be a time to think about selling. Position getting really outsized. It's funny. I think Buffett and I both are having this happen with Apple Computer. I mean, I saw the other day, Apple, I think 48% of Berkshire's current holdings are in technology companies, which is bonkers if you go back in the day. But Apple is a company that makes sense to me as a Buffett company. And I will add a note. Buffett adding, Todd Wexler and Ted Wexler, Todd Combs, I think those were names. He brought in some younger guys in the last couple of years to sort of learn the ropes for investing for Berkshire. So I think some of that is tied to that. But all that said, I think Apple has done so well for so many people that's a time when it starts to encroach on a just giant position because of the compounding and reinvesting dividends. That's a time I sort of think about it. But, overall, I'm content to just sort of ignore the noise of algorithmic trading and ignore the noise of options and just sort of stick to what I think I can control and do well, which is just a sort of, it may seem boring, but it's the old tried and true.
Well, Diego, she just covered our lesson for next Sunday, so we can just cancel that. Diego, you have any questions for LouAnn? Oh, I can't hear you.
Yep, hold on, can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
There you
Yeah,
go.
now I can.
Okay, so I'm the second spot because I was warming up the chat just till now. And thank you so much for everything you just shared. It was incredible, super interesting as well. And my question to you would be, when you started learning about investments, you said that you went through the stock investment options, this and that. And in the point of view that when we are aging, right, we're getting into the retirement age. I actually retired at 4 years old, all in stock. Okay, everything is in stock as on my property. So in your case, what kind of other assets do you might own, and we kind of diversify if you do it?
Right.
Yeah, a little more.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So yeah, I am sort of in the same boat where I'm basically 100% stocks. I mean, that I feel like I still have a lot of years left to trust these investments and to trust the companies. I do have index funds as well. So I have a total market index fund and the S&P 500 index fund in different accounts too. I own some I bonds as well because that last year it seemed like a easy thing to jump on with that return. But other than that, I'm just sort of, I believe in the markets, and I believe in picking great companies, and Berkshire's obviously one of them. That's a stock I've held for a long time. Berkshire B, I will say I've never owned the A shares, sadly. But that is sort of my position.
One of my favorite memories from the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, I stumbled upon a meeting called the Yellow Brickers. BRK is the Berkshire Hathaway symbol, and so the Yellow Brickers, like the Yellow Brick Road. These are shareholders from way back, early days of Berkshire Hathaway, who come in every year to celebrate their wonderful fortune, right? And there's a bunch of old farmers from around Omaha and just local shopkeepers and just ordinary folk who bought in Berkshire Hathaway back in the 70s or 60s, and they've held it ever since. And they just have this big party every year. It's great.
They deserve it. Good for them.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. Everything you're saying here is what we want everyone here to really grasp. Investing is a long-term endeavor. You find great businesses. You don't think about the wiggles and jiggles of the stock price. You don't think about anything else but buying great businesses. And then you hold them until something changes. And rarely does it change. But sometimes there might be a rare occasion where you would make a change in your portfolio. But if you do that, and if you're fortunate enough to start at age 21, like LouAnn did, which is a huge advantage too.
Yes,
right? Then you're almost guaranteed success. It is not as risky as people want you to believe.
Right. Yeah. Let me just jump on that and say that always think about the incentives. The incentives for the people who want you to think you can't do this. The incentives for the people who want you to think, oh, this is too risky. You need to pay me to do this. Always question that, ask why are these folks saying this? And the answer is usually because they would like you to turn all your money over to them, and so they can make a ton of money off of you over the long term.
So I just went through the endeavor to take what they call the Series 65 exam.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which means I can now supposedly give investment advice. Okay. But the process of studying for the exam amplified what you just said and what I already knew about the financial industry as a whole, which their goal is not to help you get rich, it's to help themselves get rich primarily, right? That's their primary motivation. So in studying for this exam, most of the effort that they put into the studying part was not necessarily anything about investing. Very, very little was about investing. It was about how you can legally extract money from your clients. So there you go. That's what they're tested over. How can I legally extract money from my clients? So it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to step up and ask a question of our fine guest today? Okay, Godson. Godson, what do you have? What's on your mind?
Thank you, Sonny and Diego, and thank you, Madam, for such an inspiring and great disposition. I made some questions on the platform. Number one is, what do you think in terms of portfolio ratios between stock and other assets as one grows older? Diego mentioned retirement, and that was a very good response from you. But I would like to appreciate what you think in terms of the ratio between stocks and other assets as one grows older. Secondly, what is your take if your children are still in school in terms of starting investing? Do you invest for them, or you wait until they finish and they start investing themselves? Number three, thank you for, you've taken the bull by the horns and you learned a lot from your father, and is kind of, advising women to get into it. Because you are perfectly right. They say women live longer than men. We are trying to catch up. And how do you kind of, advise wives, so to say, who may not be so much interested, or spouses who may be so much interested? How do you get them around it and make sure that they take that responsibility? Because ultimately, like you said, it's going to follow them. Thank you.
Okay, so the first question about sort of portfolio ratios. And so, yeah, I have, like I said, 100%. I do have some cash from paring back some positions. Like I said, some things that Chipotle is one that I bought in 2007. I think my cost base is 53, and the company's like, I don't know, $1,900 now. So that's an example of choosing to sort of pare back that. And so I have cash in that regard from stocks like that. But overall, again, across all of my investment accounts, it's either mutual or index funds or stocks or this bit of cash. And I just sort of keep an eye on what the positions are doing within there. I try to, like I said, I don't check often, but I would say, once a quarter, I like to check in and make sure nothing has gotten too sort of outsized position wise versus everything else. And that's a different number for everybody. So for me, I start to get a little nervous when things are like 25%, 30%, which can happen quickly when you have a company like Apple, or a high growth, high quality, strong company that's proven itself over the long term. So yeah, that, for me, it's just all stocks and little cash. Secondly, the kids question, I love the idea of starting kids out early, a very young age. I'm talking under 10 years old. Now, obviously, you're the one having to put up the cash for them, unless they really are having a great lemonade stand out there or mowing grass at that age or something. But, I think that's a wonderful way to sort of help build a lifetime appreciation for them of owning, as Sonny and I have said many times, owning companies, not tickers, helping them connect. So I for the children question, I wouldn't wait for them to be in a position where they are young adults starting out in the world. I would say start that even earlier, so that when they are young adults starting out in the world, they will already have that power of compound interest and of long-term company ownership as just something like inside of them, as something that they understand, that they've been raised with. And then your third question about, how to get wives involved. Yeah, I get it. Not everyone finds this to be a compelling topic. I'm shocked, but it's not for everybody. So, I guess my advice is always, again, it's okay if someone doesn't want to be an investor, a Warren Buffett type, doesn't want to be out there trying to pick stocks, but if you can at least encourage your partner, whether it's husband or wife, to be a part of these decisions. Because I mean, for me, that's the overall takeaway here, is that I just hate hearing stories where people have lost their significant other and they are just in complete disarray and shock, and they have no idea where anything is or what's going on. So, I mean, it might be that sounds sort of like a scare tactic, but hopefully that would work. Just so, you know, I'm doing this for your benefit. I'm trying to involve you for your benefit, because we all want to be on the same page here. And who knows, you might spark a little interest. You know, you might have someone who's your significant other becomes interested in this and wants to delve into it further. But yeah, you know, I get it. You can't make people do what they don't want to do. But if you can at least just try to get everyone sort of in on the conversation, that is a huge step forward.
So I will relate to the story I told LouAnn when she gave the same presentation at the Motley Fool event one time. So my wife had no interest, absolutely zero interest in finances or investing or anything else. So that's your job, you take care of it, right? But we started an investment club, just me and two physicians who wanted to learn about investing. We started a little investing club, and we met in our house, and one of them was a close friend of my wife. So she would come and sit in our investing club meetings, right? And she got interested, and finally I said, well, I think you're ready. Let me give you half of our stock account. I mean, I was like, should I do this? Yes, I should do this. I'm going to give you half of our stock account and you manage it. And so the first year, this has happened just about maybe a year before I met LouAnn at this and she gave the talk. So I said, look, in that first year, my wife got a 40% return and I got like 18%. So, I mean, the evidence is there, right? She are very out of the gate. She was already beating me. And so, yeah, so just talk about it. At least have I would suggest, Godson, that if they're not interested at all, you should just simply say, okay, we're going to have our quarterly meeting, just like companies report every quarter. Say, we're going to meet every quarter. I'm going to show you our portfolio. We're going to show you what I'm doing. And just so it just kind of, they're used to the mechanics. They're used to seeing what's going on. They're used to looking at the stock that you own. And then maybe they'll be a little better prepared to take it over a little bit later on. So, yeah.
I love that story.
Yeah. Well,
thanks, LouAnn. Thanks, Gil. Thanks.
Yes. Very cool. Excellent. So, any other questions for LouAnn?
I do have. I would love to just, I thank you so much for coming on the line and actually sharing your experience. I went through, a few things, educating myself about the finances and going into the new thing, what Sunny was saying, puts and calls and getting the premium into that. And for the past, I would say probably, 3 years now, I am, trading in the paper account. Okay. So getting my hands on. It's not clicking well, being honest. It's not clicking because I just learned that there is hedge companies that are manipulating the puts and calls and all that. And I'm like, oh my God, I spent money to educate myself. And I met someone that said to me, Chris, give up. Why are you doing this for? And I'm like, I spent money. Why not? And he actually went, what you're saying, just buy a good stocks, right? And invest, get dividends, and you have peace of mind and you can do something else, right? And I said, okay, well, that's something new. And I connected to more people. And I believe in more, I have geared my mind that I'm going to start meeting people that were coming my way, and took a little bit longer. But also, I'm so glad that you're mentioning it because it prompts for the new generation, not my generation, but I'm talking about my niece. I'm talking about the young generation to start learning and be exposed to how money works. And the title is fantastic because I can actually send the title to my niece and say, look, would you like to read that? Right? It's about the girls and someone that invests. So I just wanted to share that being exposed to this beautiful, actually, network of people, and have inspiration to share for the young generation to be able to learn. And you, Sunny, just another time I tap into kind of the webinar that you put it on. I didn't know that we had the financial university. that was the first time that I learned about it. And I'm like, no way, Livebook got that. So appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing and being open and giving your experience to us. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing too. And yeah, I'm glad that you're inspired to sort of share this with your nieces and other young people. Because yeah, I think that's the other part of this. It's just so important is that none of us, or I shouldn't say none, maybe some places have financial education, but I never was raised with any of it. You know, and we see kids graduating college with tons of credit card debt. Because I asked one time, I won't disclose who, but a family member who did this, and he said, well, I just kept getting the applications. And I said, oh no, that's you know, so that's part of it too, aside from the investing side of things, is just the sort of general understanding of things like credit card debt and having an emergency fund and all of these things. So whatever we can do to help the people behind us, I am just 100% for.
So I'll give a little bit of spoiler for those who haven't taken our Financial Freedom Fundamentals course, which is free, right? It's a wonderful course. In the towards the end, after we've taught you how to gain control of your finances and start thinking about investing, we asked you to think about your legacy, right? And most people think of, oh, that means I've got to give money to my children, right? Well, that may or may not be part of it. Warren Buffett is worth what, $100 billion, and he's only going to give his kids a tiny fraction of that, right? So, but more important than giving them the money, you give them your knowledge. You give them your wisdom, your experience. You teach them how money works, as you said there, and how to invest and how to identify great businesses. That legacy is going to be much more valuable than a bunch of cash you hand them after you're in the grave, right? Because that's usually squandered because they don't know how to deal with it. So I want to encourage everyone, even if you do not have children, you have young people in your life, right? And you can pass your wisdom and your knowledge on to young people. There is nothing better you can do. We talk about the ripple effect all the time from Wealth Angels. We want to teach people how to do this so they can teach people how to do this, so they can teach people how to do this. And eventually we'll get to a place where the world is not so financially fragile as it is today. So yeah, that's our goal. That's our mission. And LouAnn, we're over our hour. Unless there's another pressing question, I'm going to let you go back to your normal life, but we really appreciate you coming and talking with us today.
Oh, well, thank you all so much for your time. And yeah, I've loved it. It's been a lovely time meeting all of you. And I'm so impressed with what you're doing and so encouraged by it and so inspired by it. So, you know, don't stop. Keep it up. Keep that temperament intact. That's your thing. Manage those emotions. But seriously, thank all of you. Thank you, Diego. Thank you, Sunny, for having me. Thanks to all of you for tuning in and listening. And yeah, let's just keep this. It's like compound interest. We just keep this knowledge going and compounding and growing. So,
and those of you who know people who could not make it today, because I know this is a work day, we usually have our events on the weekend, but if you can't make it, we will have the recording. Make sure they watch the recording. So everyone, thanks for showing up. Let's go out and make some difference in our financial life. It is Financial Month. Woohoo! So, LouAnn, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, LouAnn. Bye.
Thank you, Diego.
Bye-bye, everybody.